Lauren, well, thank you so much.
Of course. Let me go ahead and get my screen pulled up here. Mhm. All right. Is everyone looking at a PowerPoint kind of presentation? Perfect. Thank you very much. And thank you all very much for being here as well. Whether it is early morning for you or late in the evening, like it is for me, I'm, grateful that you're all here and, that we can come together to learn some strategies for hopefully being able to teach English online. So just a few reminders. My name is Lauren Rogers. Let's see. And most of the training does come from this particular textbook, Teaching Adults, an ESL resource book. If you are interested and this is your first time teaching, I strongly recommend this book if you have a chance to get a copy of it. Or for those of you who have been able to purchase a copy, if there are any chapters or activities or resources in that book that you find particularly helpful or that you think would be great for the group, please feel free to take a picture of the pages that you are interested in or send me a note and let me know what pages they are. And I'm happy to, scan some copies of the book that I have for us to share with the group, before the next session. So last week we went through some of the basics of teaching English, talking about some of the different English levels, strategies for teaching grammar. Tonight we're going to talk about teaching online and some of the resources that are available to make that successful. And then next week, we're going to be focusing on lesson planning. So after tonight, I'm going to be giving you all a little bit of homework. Your homework is going to be to put together a mock lesson plan. And then when we come together next week, we're going to workshop those. We're going to work in pairs. You're going to get a chance to go into the breakout rooms to, talk through your lesson plan with a partner. So hopefully by the time we're finished with next week, you guys can all walk away from this feeling comfortable and confident, being able to put together a lesson to teach online for someone. And if you're not quite there yet, I'm happy to do some additional sessions on getting comfortable teaching on Zoom, learning how to share your screen, share YouTube videos, all of that fun stuff. So if you do need a little bit of extra help getting over the technology hurdle of this, I'm happy to plan, an optional fourth session to help with some of that stuff. So I would like to do a little bit of a review from last week. So starting with the 4 principles of ESL teaching, who can give me an example of what we mean by meaningful communication when we're talking about working with adult learners? You can unmute yourself, you can type in the chat. But whenever we think about meaningful communication,
their hobbies or their jobs or their lifestyle. About you give an example of whether it's a mother or a sport person or student.
yeah, absolutely, exactly. Meaningful communication. What is important to the student? What is it that they want to work on? What do they want to focus on? Is it their hobbies? Is it their job? Is it their education? Meaningful communication is just trying to find out what is important to your student and trying to find activities and lessons that can help them reach those goals. What about success, not perfection? Who remembers what we mean by that from last week? I'll give you a hint. This changes whenever you're working with a beginner level student compared to when you're working with an advanced level student. Success versus perfection. What do we mean by that?
Well, I'm going to throw in there. I can't remember your definition exactly, but I do remember you talking about this and saying that if somebody's at a beginner level, I'm not going to keep correcting them to try to make them perfect. I'm just going to accept where they are and help them to go further. Is that right?
That is exactly what I mean. Yep. When you're working with beginner level students and you're still trying to build their confidence with English, you want to focus on success. Are they able to get their message across? If they have to use translation tools, if they have to look up words, if they have to show pictures, that is okay when they are at the beginning level and they are still getting comfortable with the language. As they progress and they become more at the intermediate level and they start caring more about grammar and structures, then you want to start focusing a little bit more on correcting some of those things that you see. Once you're working with students at the advanced level, they do tend to care a little bit more about perfection, especially with things like punctuation, um, pronouncing words correctly, all of that different stuff. So what about reducing anxiety? Obviously, this is very important when you're working with English language learners, but what are some ways that we can do it as teachers? What can we do to try to reduce our students' anxiety when they're learning a language?
Well, something you said was understand your student. Understand, and the skills to focus on, is it speaking? Is it listening? Is it reading? Is it writing? See where the need is according to the student, because they're all going to be individual and different, even if they're a beginner or intermediate or advanced.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's beautiful. Getting to know your student, knowing what it is they want to work on, what some of their, weaker areas are. If I have a student that I know is not very confident speaking in English, I'm not going to put them on the spot in the middle of class and ask them a question, right? But if I know that student is a little bit more comfortable with writing, with their writing skills, then maybe I would ask them to type a word in the chat box, right? Or do something that they might be a little bit more comfortable with as opposed to speaking. That's wonderful, getting to know your student and knowing what they're comfortable with. What about increasing exposure? Who remembers what we talked about for that one?
I don't remember exactly, but I'm guessing it's about increasing the difficulty level little by little, so they don't get overwhelmed with material.
Yeah, that's part of it. Absolutely. Not giving folks too much information all at once, not, overwhelming them. Um, but also thinking about what are ways that they can work on their English between your class sessions, especially with, if we're going to be working with a lot of students that are in Myanmar right now, how much opportunity are they getting to really speak in English between your class sessions? What are some activities that you could give for them to work on, or some things that they could do to try to incorporate that English learning into their daily life? So you can get kind of creative with this stuff, right? Maybe challenge your students to get together for coffee one day and to practice having the entire coffee, speaking in English to each other. See if they're able to do that. If there are multiple people in a household that are working on English together, maybe challenge them to have one night where they speak in English over dinner for the entire meal. See if they're able to do that, right? See if maybe they can label new vocabulary words in their house with different things. So trying to think of different ways to get them using English in their daily life between the different class sessions. And then thinking about the 4 language skills, right? Like we talked about last week, when someone's learning English, they're not just working on one skill, they're actually working on 4 of them. And then you have grammar that's kind of interwoven throughout all 4 of these. But these are 4 different skills that people are going to develop at different rates. So if you have students that are much more comfortable with their speaking, listening, and having conversation, but maybe their reading and writing skills are much, much lower, Well, maybe you need to spend a little bit more time focusing on the reading and writing and trying to get those skills, caught up to the speaking and listening. So keeping in mind that, when students are learning, they're going to be at different levels. Within one beginner class, you could have a whole wide range of levels, within these different skills. One beginner student could be somewhat intermediate with speaking and listening, but very, very low with their reading and writing skills. So be prepared to adapt lessons and activities, kind of activity by activity, depending on the students that you have in your class. And then we talked a little bit last week about teaching grammar and some different approaches for that. Implicit teaching versus explicit teaching, right? So if you are working with a very beginner level student, do you think it's going to be wise to immediately start explaining grammar structures and, what a preposition is and gerund phrases? Well, maybe not, right? For beginner level students, they are focused on functional English, being able to use it, being able to understand the basics of it, being able to build vocabulary, right? So a lot of times, if you are focused on working with the beginner level learner, the best approach can be implicit teaching. So showing lots of visuals, showing lots of images, repetition, modeling, having dialogues where people can practice, reading a script back and forth. When students get more into the intermediate and advanced level, that's when we get more into the explicit teaching, right? That's when we really start explaining the grammar rules, the structures. We start correcting pronunciation and punctuation a little bit more. So understand your students, right? Understand where they are with their level and figure out what approach is going to be best for the topic that you're wanting to teach with them. Because depending on your students and depending on the topic, it could vary from class to class, which approach you think is going to be best. So let's review our students a little bit. We have our beginner level student, Anna, who is a new mother. She likes to sing and cook for some of her hobbies. She's not working right now, but she was a former math teacher. Then we have our intermediate student, Thomas, who is a college student. He wants to be a doctor. He plays a lot of sports. He lives with his family, and he has a lot of younger siblings. Then we have Maria, our advanced English student, who is a business owner. She makes jewelry. She likes to paint and craft. And she has 4 cats. She's a pet lover. So keep those students in mind because as we're talking about some different strategies and lesson plans, throughout tonight, I'm going to keep referencing those 3 students and how we might be able to adapt and alter the lessons, for the learners that we're working with. So for tonight, we're going to talk about some strategies for teaching online. I'm going to show you some different online resources that might be helpful for you to know about. Because we know a lot of the students are going to be interested in the GED, I did think it was going to be important to show you guys some of that material and to talk a little bit about scaffolding students into the GED, if they're not quite ready to jump straight into that.
Thank you so much, Lauren.
Absolutely. Sure. And then we're going to finish up with lesson planning and how to design, a lesson plan if you're getting ready to put together something for a class. So any questions for me about tonight or anything that we covered from last week? Okay, perfect. All right, so some strategies for teaching online. One of my best pieces of advice is to learn to embrace the technology. If we are already doing this online, let's figure out how to do it well, right? Don't be scared of it. Don't be intimidated by it, but learn how to use it and learn what works best for you. Not every teacher that I've worked with has the same approach when it comes to teaching online. I have some that prefer worksheets. They like to find online worksheets, then just share their screen and work with their students going through a worksheet that they're looking at together. That's beautiful. That works really well. I have other teachers that really like watching Zoom videos or watching YouTube videos and then discussing them and having conversations back and forth. I have some teachers that have gotten really comfortable with Zoom and they've gotten a little bit more creative. Maybe they like to put students into breakout rooms where they can do dialogue practice with each other, right? Put students into breakout rooms of 2 people each, and then they have a buddy to do some conversation practice with for a little while. I once had a teacher that knew how to like change their Zoom background the way that Nancy's is changed right now. But he did this thing where he had the whole collection of pictures and photos of major landmarks from around the world. And every single class, their warm-up activity was a guessing game. You know, guess where Mr. Ben is that day. And he would have a different Zoom background. You know, one day he might be sitting in front of the Eiffel Tower. One day he might be, I think there was one day he was even underwater, like in front of a picture of the Great Barrier Reef or something. But their warm-up activity would be this kind of guessing game back and forth with the students, trying to figure out, you know, where was the picture in his background that day. So figure out what works for you, because it's going to vary from teacher to teacher. There's no one size fits all approach to this, right? That principle, success, not perfection, that applies to us too. As teachers, we don't have to be perfect either. We just want to be successful, right? So if you try something one week and it doesn't work for you, you can either work on it and try to do it again, or you can scratch that activity and say, this doesn't work for me. Let me try something else. That's okay. That's completely okay. But one thing to keep in mind whenever you are trying to incorporate technology into your lessons, know what kind of technology your students have access to. If most of your students are studying from a computer, it gives you a lot more opportunities to do things like share PowerPoint, share worksheets. But if you have a student that is studying from a smartphone or a cell phone where they have a really small screen, keep that in mind if you are making your own worksheet or PowerPoint. You want to make sure that you use really, really big font, right? So if someone is looking at it from a smartphone screen, they're able to actually see the words. So, you know, sometimes a good thing to do with your students, maybe the very first night of class, whenever you are doing introductions and talking about goals, talk about technology and what kind of technology they have access to, because that's going to help you out as a teacher whenever you're trying to figure out which activities and, you know, resources that you want to work with. Use lots of visuals whenever you are teaching online. It can be really helpful to just have Google pulled up. So if you ever just need to do a quick search for a picture, you know, to illustrate a concept or to show a new image or something, that can be really helpful. Go slow whenever you are teaching online. We're going for quality over quantity here. Please don't think that you need to teach the entire English language within 6 months. Please don't think that you need to teach the entire GED within a year, okay? Get to know your students, get to know where they are, and go at a pace that works well for them too, okay? Now, that being said, don't let the lowest level student slow down the entire group either. My best piece of advice is to try to teach to the middle of the class. The students that are a little bit more advanced, you can try to find creative ways, additional writing assignments to, you know, keep them engaged in learning. For the students that are a little lower level, you can try to water down and simplify activities for them to make it work. But try to teach to the middle of the class, right? Try not to let, you know, any particular group, you know, set the pace other than you, the teacher. It's much better to find ways to adapt individual activities than to try to rush through material too quickly or to spend an entire 6 months working on introductions. Does that make sense? I see some thumbs up and head nods. Okay, perfect. And then, yeah, like I said, get creative. A lot of times this can be a little bit intimidating for new teachers, especially if you don't have a lot of experience teaching online. But once you get your groove and you figure out what works for you, it can actually be a lot of fun. During the COVID pandemic, you know, my entire ESL program had to switch over to online. And even after we started having in-person classes again, I had about half of my students that ended up preferring the online classes. Same thing with my teachers. I'll never forget, I had one student from Morocco say, I would much rather learn English in the evenings on the couch in my pajamas, you know, drinking my chamomile tea. So there are some benefits to it. So learn to embrace it, get creative, figure out what works for you. And like I said, focus on success, not perfection for yourself as well. You guys do not have to be perfect at this either. Okay, so now I'm going to show you some resources that you guys are going to want to know about online. There are a lot of free materials out there that you can find. It can be very easy to accidentally fall down the rabbit hole when you just start Googling ESL resources. So one of my big pieces of advice to you as you're getting started and you are researching websites and different types of things, if you find a website or a resource that you really like, that speaks to you as a teacher, I want you to save it, bookmark it, do something so that you can find that resource again. That way, whenever you're putting together lessons in the future, instead of going down that Google rabbit hole and spending 100 hours getting essentially back to the same resource, you have a starting point that you can go to. So build yourself a bit of a teacher toolkit of some of those resources. So I'm going to show you some of my favorite free ones, but I'm also going to show you a resource called Eli. This one is a subscription-based website, but I think it's like $150 for the entire year, and you can have an unlimited number of people using it. So whenever I worked at the Literacy Council out in Wilmington, we had one account that we paid for, but I had all of my volunteer teachers that just shared the same login. So that's something to consider. You know, if you guys have a means to do like maybe a GoFundMe or some type of fundraising, it's not that expensive, but it will also save you a tremendous amount of time whenever it comes to lesson planning. So I'm going to show you that. I'm going to show you some of my favorite freebies that you can find online. I'm going to show you some really great ESL YouTube channels that you can also find. And then I'm going to show you some of the GED prep stuff that you can find. So now I'm going to jump out of this and I'm going to share a different screen. So give me just a moment. Bear with me while I get everything pulled up. All right, are you looking at something that says sample lessons?
Yes.
Yep, perfect. All right, so the good thing about the Eli resource is that you can find some of the freebie lessons to look through to give you an idea what it is. So Eli used to be called ESL Library, and they have over 3,000 lessons and resources that are available for different groups at every possible level that you can think of, on all kinds of different topics that you can think of. And it is used by over 100 different countries, so it should be accessible to folks in Myanmar, hopefully. We may want to test out a little bit of that before actually purchasing a full subscription. But let's pick one of these to take a look at. Let's do one of the grammar stories. So one of my favorite, one of the reasons I love this website so much is because all of their lessons are available as PDFs that you can actually print. So I used it for my in-person classes, but it's also available online as well. So it's really easy to adapt, you know, for online versus in-person classes, which can be really, really great. So the PDFs really, truly just are like printable versions of the virtual activities. But if you are not the most tech savvy person, some things that I would like to do is maybe print the PDF of the lesson for myself as the teacher so that I have something printed in front of me that I can kind of read from. And then I may have the virtual lesson pulled up for my students. So the virtual lesson, let me show you what that looks like. So it gives you a little image here for this one. And then you've got a little reading activity.
My classmates. This is my classroom, and these are my classmates. My best friend's name is Andrew. He is drawing on the board. My other friend, Amy, is very funny. She is talking and telling jokes to Brad.
So let's say you get through this whole little activity. Maybe you have to listen to it a few times. Maybe you have to clarify some vocabulary words along the way. And then you move on to the question set.
My classmates. This is my classroom, and these are my classmates.
So where is she, the person who is telling the story standing? Then you can have a discussion with the students. They can try to figure it out. If you have to refer back to the story, or re-listen to it again, you're able to. What is she doing? She's looking out the window, right? And it doesn't do it with the sample lessons online, but with the subscription version, it actually checks this for you. And it'll give you a big green check mark if your sentence is correct, or it'll give you a big red X if there's something that needs to be reworded, or if you're missing something there. So once you get through all of these little activities, then look, it has another story that it can give you to talk about. And then again, another set of questions that you can work through with your students. So this one activity alone, if you did all 3 of the stories, that could probably take you an hour to get through with the students, right? Especially if you have to stop along the way, clarify vocabulary words, maybe ask the students themselves to type the answers in the chat box for some of these responses. You could easily spend an entire hour just getting through this one kind of activity, right? So let's hop back to some of the other ones. Ooh, some of the grammar worksheets. Let's look at those. So another reason I love this is because I'm not a huge grammar person. I fell into teaching English somewhat by accident and absolutely fell in love with it. But I've never had to teach grammar before. And when I first got started, this was one of the things that was most intimidating to me. So that's another reason I really like this resource, is because it's like having training wheels on for teaching English and teaching grammar. So it really is an awesome resource. So let's take a look at what this one looks like.
ESL Library. Second conditional. What is the conditional mood in English? We use the conditional mood for hypothetical situations. When we don't know if something will happen, we make a guess about the outcome. What is the second conditional? We use the second conditional for an unlikely or impossible outcome. This means the outcome probably wouldn't happen because the condition can't or probably won't happen. An example of an unlikely situation is, if I won the lottery, I would buy a tropical island. Winning the lottery is a very unlikely condition, so the outcome of buying a tropical island would probably never happen. An example of an impossible situation is, if I had wings, I would fly up to the stars. Since people don't
Think about how much fun you could have with students just coming up with if-then clauses, right? Getting them comfortable with that kind of language. Then there are grammar notes that you can work through if you wanted. Some of these little graphs and charts can also be really, really helpful for students who want to have like a quick reference to go back and look at. Again, you've got some practice sentences that you could work through with folks. You know, if I were hungry, I will make, would make. And again, same thing, it's not checking it right now, but if you had the subscription version, it kind of checks this along the way for you. This one has some fill in the blank activities that you could do with students. But again, you can really truly find an activity on just about anything on here. You can search for specific levels for students, and it also has assessment tests. So if you wanted to give students an English test, you know, for their homework the very first night of class to figure out exactly what level they're at, you can do that through this website too. And then you can make sure that you're picking lessons and activities that are, you know, right at the level of your students that you want to work with. So do you all have any questions about this resource? Do you want to see anything else? Do you want to check out any of the other lessons before we move on?
I was looking at the pricing there, Lauren, this is really, I mean, this is turnkey. It's fabulous. So I was looking at it and, you know, as an organization, it says I could purchase one for a full set for 188, and it would be that per person in the organization. But then I didn't know, like, I was looking at that pricing to see if I were to do it. I don't know if they have a nonprofit pricing, but I could check that out too and see if they've got, because I really love.
You could.
Yeah.
So what we did, and I don't know, you don't have to do it this way. We purchased one of those licenses and we just shared the login information
Okay,
with all of our different teachers.
okay,
I think that big organizational cost, there are some schools and colleges and elementary schools
okay.
that use this program for teaching English and teaching literacy. So for like the big elementary schools, whenever they are actually linking student accounts to the teacher accounts, I think that's where they're a little bit more particular about the teachers having their own individual licensing. But if you are just planning on using it for looking up lesson plans, downloading lessons, I have not had any problems with my volunteers sharing an account.
So what if we end up, if several of these classes are at one time, and I can find this out too, if several of the classes are at one time and we have one big meeting, but they have breakout rooms using the same login, that could overload the system though.
That could. Yep,
Okay.
I don't know about how many people can be logged in under the same account at the same time.
Okay,
That would need to be researched a little bit.
I love the resource. It's amazing. And to me, it's like, it just really walks you through. So I'll do some research on that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So now let me show you some of the other things that you can find for free out there as well. So let me hop to a different screen. All right, are you looking at something that says all ESL at the top? Awesome. So this one came specifically from, 43 free ESL worksheets that are available just on this one, website alone. You've got really, really simple stuff. So just talking about emotions. You've got some that focus on pronunciation and, getting comfortable speaking the English words. This one is awesome. It's an actual diagram that shows you how to teach the sounds of English. So, where to put your tongue, where to put, where did the vowel sounds originate? Is it the back of the throat? Is it closer to the roof of your mouth? So this can be really, really helpful for correcting pronunciation issues that you might be seeing with students. You've got some writing activities, you've got some occupation activities, but let's just take a look at one. So actually, I already have this pulled up. So are you looking at one of the emotions worksheets? Okay. So again, if you're working with a very beginning level class, this would be the type of resource that you would want to start with for your students, right? So just building vocabulary. So what word do we think probably goes with number 1 here out of our little vocab list down here below?
Angry.
I agree, Patsy. I would go with angry for this one here. So, we would say, okay, so number 1, we're going to go with angry. We're going to think it's that one, right? Now you may want to put this in like a PDF or something so that you can actually like write on it. Again, I'm actually not the most tech savvy person here, but that's something that you could do. It could also be really fun to, like, as you're working and going through these different vocabulary words. Okay, so angry goes with number 1. Everyone in class, make an angry face right now. What do you look like when you're angry? That can be a silly way to reduce anxiety. It's a TPS activity, total physical response. So a really good learning strategy. When folks are learning new vocabulary words, if they can associate some type of physical movement with that new word, it makes it easier for them to retain it and memorize it. And emotions and learning the vocabulary for emotions is a really good way to practice that activity. So yeah, show me an angry face. Show me a happy face. Nancy, I see your hand go up.
You know what? I just absolutely love this because believe it or not, I did this for my daughter when she was, I think she was 3. I did the same thing. I drew this out and I said, what face are we making to help her have some facial recognition and understand some things. In fact, I just took a picture and sent it to her because this is, to me, I just think, a lot of this is really great for your small children too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's awesome.
So let's say you get through this activity, you introduce the vocabulary, and then you want to challenge them a little bit. So then you show them this image, right? And you start saying things like, okay, this person up here, what do we think her emotion is? Out of those vocabulary words that we just learned, which one do we think this one is? Right? And then you can start, associating the emotions with actual pictures that they see, with actual images, right? So that's something that you could do for maybe an advanced level group, right? Maybe if you are trying to figure out what emotion words the students already know, you could show something like this to an intermediate level class and say, okay, let's brainstorm. What are all of the emotions that you see here? Let's type them all in the chat really quick, right? And see what types of emotions people can come up with. But then that tells you what type of emotions you can expand on. Very often, students may know words like happy, sad, angry, scared, but maybe they don't know words like frustrated, confused, anxious, depressed, ecstatic. So this can give you a good idea for where you can build vocabulary. When you're moving into a new content area or a new theme, doing brainstorm kind of activities just to see what the students already know before you start building on it. But you could even use something like this for an advanced level class. Folks who already speak English pretty well, they already know the emotion words, but maybe they're working on expressing themselves and doing, more expressive writing activities. You could say something like, okay, this little boy down here wearing the red glasses, what do we think he's thinking about right now? Look at his face. What emotion do we think he's feeling? Why do we think he's feeling that way? And students could have a whole little writing activity, talking about coming up with the scenario, what's going on in this little kid's life that's, making him think so hard here, right? So now let me hop back into some of these other things. All right. So now are you looking at YouTube? I see some head nods. Awesome. So this is one of my favorite YouTube channels, English Easy Practice. This is a great one to use because it also has a lot of visuals. They slow things down a lot. But But you can also find a ton of different videos here for different types of dialogues and different types of activities. But these can be good little activities to assess.
Practice around you? Do you feel shy or nervous when trying to speak English? Well, we have great news for you. Now you can practice English speaking with our special stories. The English Easy Practice course is designed to help you learn English by listening to fun, energetic, and interesting stories. In this course, you get audio story lessons, so you can improve your listening and speaking with every lesson. Great listening skills eventually become great speaking skills. Forget about the textbooks, forget about grammar rules, forget about the old tradition.
I was hoping that was actually going to show you a practice lesson. Let me see if I can find one of those real quick.
These are great resources.
Yeah, you guys, I have spent probably hundreds of hours going down that Google rabbit hole looking for ESL resources. So I'm giving you guys a jump start here by showing you some of my favorites. But that doesn't mean you have to use this either, right? As you guys start researching and finding things on your own, you may find other things that work better for you. I think this is one of their practice stories. Let's see. Let's take a look.
I miss you so much.
Hello, welcome to the English Easy Practice course. There was a man, his name was Henry. He was traveling by train. He got off the train at the West Town station.
Yeah, so this is another one of those activities. Let's see, this story is 12 minutes long. If you stop it and pause it along the way to clarify terms, to explain concepts, for students to ask questions, this is another one of those activities that could easily take maybe 30 to 45 minutes to really get through, especially if you have a lot of discussion questions, that come up after the story or as it goes on. So yeah, do not underestimate the power of YouTube. There can be some really good stuff out there too. All right, so now let me show you some of the GED tests. Are you looking at a GED website now? Awesome, thank you. I really appreciate the head nodding and the thumbs up. You guys are doing a great job of that. So you can find a ton of GED prep materials online as well. And not all of them are the easiest to navigate and to teach from. So give me just a second here. So the GED has 4 different parts to it: language arts, math, science, and social studies. And this is just to give you an idea about what the questions look like for the science part of the GED test. Genetically modified crops and livestock offer the possibility of greater yield and food quality. If we have a student that we just taught the emotions to, right, that we were just working on that type of activity, how do you think they would feel if we gave them something like this to work on? It would be a little overwhelming, right? So I want you to keep this in mind. This is what we're working towards, okay? Students being able to read passages like this and then be able to answer questions like this. Based on the passage above, if genetically modified crops were to be banned, what could be the largest negative impact to humans? Yikes, right? If you're an English language learner, this could be a really challenging thing to work through. Even if you speak English, this could be a really challenging thing to work through, right? So when your students are ready for it, there are a ton of GED prep activities out there. There are a lot of practice tests. You can find them in every single subject. Reasoning through the language arts gets even more complicated. The passages are very long. And you will likely have multiple questions that go along with the same passage. Whenever it gets into essay writing, that's another really challenging piece for students. So this is what we're working towards, okay? But as teachers, it can be really helpful for you guys to take a look at some of this so you can see what kinds of questions they ask for the GED. Because those are skills that you can start working on with your students even when they are at the beginning level with their English, right? So now let me hop out of this and get back into my other presentation.
So while you're doing that, Lauren, I was making a list of the links that you are going to. So I have English Easy Practice. I've got LE.com or Eli.com. And then I've got the GED Practice. Wasn't there one more that you shared?
Did you get the YouTube channel?
Which,
Yep,
which was the Easy English.
Yep.
Oh, no, all, I don't have this one. All
Yep.
ESL. That's it. Okay, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Allesl.com. That's the good one too.
Put that on there.
Okay. Are you looking at my presentation again?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. So let's talk about scaffolding for the GED, right? Obviously, if you jump straight to that material, it can be a little bit overwhelming for some of the students that you might be working with. But there are some critical thinking skills and some things that you can work on with your students along the way as they're learning English to get them ready for those, more academic, higher level type of passages and articles. So focus on critical thinking skills and making sure to develop writing skills along the way. Very, very often in the classes that I've worked with before, people overlook the importance of writing. It's very easy to have conversations and dialogues and to work on listening skills. But when I say writing, I mean actually writing full sentences, doing journaling activities. Fill in the blank doesn't necessarily get students ready for essay writing. So it really is important to remember to work on writing skills. Fill in the blank activities can be great for the lower level students, but if you're trying to get them, ready for the GED and working on essay writing, they need to be working on writing sentences, as they are learning their English. Working on that skill along the way is going to be really helpful for them whenever they're working towards that test. But focusing also on things like fact versus opinion in the articles that you're reading, understanding the author's purpose for different types of, assignments and, articles that you read. Talking about supporting arguments versus main ideas for main arguments, talking about themes or key takeaways from different, articles. Talking about cause and effect, some of those if-then clauses that, one of the, I think, grammar lessons we just looked at, included some of those. So you can still work on GED focused skills without using GED prep materials. So, kind of keep that in mind as you're working with the students. Use the materials that are appropriate for their level, but make sure to incorporate these critical thinking skills and the things that they're going to need to know for the GED as they're kind of going along the way through this. It can also be helpful to incorporate a little bit of math, a little bit of science, and a little bit of history along the way, right? That doesn't mean necessarily jump straight into photosynthesis and all of the chemistry that goes into it, right? But when you're talking about, maybe something like gardening, you can talk about how much water does a plant need, how much sunlight does a plant need. You can get into the science terminology. Maybe you can introduce photosynthesis as a vocabulary word, without getting into the nitty-gritty about how it works, right? So you can incorporate some of this stuff along the way as you're working on English and, you know, building up those skills. Are there any questions about that? Go ahead.
I have a question about writing sentences. Is there a tool or method you use to teach students to write a sentence?
I start with teaching the building blocks of grammar. So what is a noun? What is a verb? What is an adjective? What is a subject? I start with those 4 things. And then I would start with very, very simple sentences. The cat is hungry, right? And then I may build on that. The orange cat is hungry. The orange cat is hungry because. But as I'm writing these sentences, I like to point out the building blocks. Okay, so in that sentence, the orange cat is hungry. Where's my noun? Where's my verb? Helping students being able to identify those building blocks of grammar along the way makes it easier for them to look for the patterns whenever they start building those sentences on their own. So give them a verb, you know, run, ran, running, and challenge them to write their own sentence using that verb. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? Especially if you're working with a beginner, we're focusing on success, not perfection, right? But I found it really, really helpful to focus on those building blocks of grammar before really starting to get into, you know, writing sentences. It's going to be a lot easier to explain grammar structures and grammar patterns when students know the difference between a noun and a verb. So I hope that helps. Any other questions about GED or, you know, working towards that? Okay, excellent. So then let's think about lesson planning for a little bit. I like to start off every single lesson with a little bit of a review or a little bit of a warm-up activity. Depending on what we're going to be working on, you know, that may vary from lesson to lesson exactly what that looks like. But whatever it is, it's going to be something light and easy to help reduce anxiety, right? If I had opened up the presentation tonight with you all and I immediately jumped into GED prep, how would you guys have felt? Yep, I like that, Nancy. Probably a little bit anxious, right? That is not a good way to reduce anxiety when you're working with students. So if you know you're going to be working on a difficult topic, you're going to be doing a lot of new vocabulary words, you're going to be introducing something new with grammar, don't do that as the very first activity in the class. Do something light, do something easy to help, you know, get students comfortable and to maybe warm up, you know, and to get ready for whatever it is you're going to be introducing next. Always have an objective in mind whenever you are putting together a lesson. What do you want students to be able to do at the end of that lesson? I like to think about practicality. You know, I want my students to be able to use the present tense. I want my students to know kitchen vocabulary. I want my students to be able to write sentences in the past tense. What is your objective for that lesson? It's okay if you go off on little mini tangents. It's okay if you end up working on other vocabulary words. If questions come up along the way, that is okay. But keep that objective in mind and try to make sure you're going to be able to go back to that objective. That's going to help you stay on track. That's going to help you keep structure. And that's going to help you and your students feel like you're actually accomplishing something at the end of class. I like to tell students what that objective is at the start of class. Once we get through that warm-up activity, I will say something like, okay, so now we're going to work on telling time and days of the week. That's going to be the next thing that we're getting into here. Guys, give me just a minute. My dog's just intruded. Let me kick them out.
Well, while you do that, I wanted to ask, I was thinking to ask Alan, when she was talking about the GED, I was thinking you are already working toward that. And so Alan, I don't know if you have any tips for us, maybe you can help us as we're working through that? Maybe you can give us some pointers that we can make it easier.
I don't actually know a lot about GET tests, but I have to say that it's like really, really not that hard, but I don't think it's for people that just started learning English. As I'm seeing so far in my class and like other classes, there are people who don't even like know the basics of English and they're attending the GET courses and they're like struggling a lot with the grammar structures and the questions and everything. So yeah, I don't think it's meant for basic English learners. It's more like an advanced and intermediate level students. So yeah,
Sure.
and it
So what do you
yeah.
think, what are you feeling about today's, all we're learning right here in English as a second language? I mean, right now, how are you feeling about this since you know English and you know Burmese and what the people face there? How do you feel about that for the young people? Do you have any tips on that? I wholeheartedly agree with you, and we need to help people learn more. But how are you feeling about it? What we're learning today?
I think what we're learning today is great and I think it can help a lot of people. It can help a lot of students here who are struggling to learn English. So I don't really have that much tips for it, but yeah.
But I appreciate a young person's viewpoint in a country that has a totally different writing system and language system. It's so it's good to hear a young person's viewpoint on that. How long have you learned English? How long have you known English?
Um, since I was like 4,
Oh,
I
okay.
think. Yeah, ever since I was young.
Well, you got great English. Welcome back, Lauren. I just wanted
Yeah.
to go
Yeah,
ahead.
thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
no, I would love to ask Alan a question too. For folks who are very, very beginner with their English and they really don't know English at all, do you think these types of lessons and activities would work for them over Zoom?
Yeah, of course. If you,
Oh, good.
yeah, I think it would. It's
Awesome.
very effective. Yeah,
Awesome. Well, thank you. I'm happy to hear that.
yeah,
Um,
you're.
So yeah, having an objective in mind whenever you're doing lesson planning, making sure to think about all 4 of your different skills when you are lesson planning as well, right? So making sure to include speaking, writing, listening. A big piece of advice I have for new ESL teachers, keep in mind that for a lot of your students, these English classes might be the only chance they have during the week to speak in English. So as a teacher, you don't want to spend the entire hour-long lesson you being the only one speaking. You want to make sure to give your students as much time as possible to speak in English and to use the language themselves. I was very bad about this. Whenever I first got started with English teaching, I would just get up and lecture, for an entire class, going over a grammar topic, reading an article, doing all of that stuff. But it's a lot more effective when you can give the students as much opportunity as possible to use the language themselves. So keep that in mind whenever you are, putting together a lesson plan. Make sure that you're including time for the students to use the language, whether that is giving them speaking practice, whether that is putting them into breakout rooms so they can work with a partner to work on a dialogue, whether that is giving them time to type answers in the chat box, if that works better for them. Make sure to include time for them to use the language as well. If you are also a new teacher, I encourage you to be over-prepared for your lessons. Especially if you are trying out a new activity for the first time, you never know exactly how long it's going to take you to get through that activity. There have been times that I have had a worksheet thinking that it will take 20 minutes to get through, and then it takes me 45 minutes to get through. Or the opposite might happen. I could have an activity plan that I think will take the entire class, and then guess what? The students absolutely hate it. They want nothing to do with it. So I say, okay, let's not do that and focus on something else. So it is much better to be over prepared than under prepared. Always have a backup activity that you can work on with your students, that you can do, at the last minute if you really need to. Especially when you are still getting started and you're, trying to get a feel for your students and their skill set and what activities are going to take a little bit more time than others. That can be really helpful. And if there are any activities that you are not able to get through in a lesson, well, guess what? Maybe you could use that as a warm-up activity for your next class that you're working on with your students. So again, we're thinking about quality over quantity. Don't feel like you have to get through everything that you have in a lesson plan, all in one night. Make sure that your students are comfortable with the skill, they're confident with it before you move on to something else. That said, it does not have to be perfect. They do not have to master the skill before moving on to something else. It takes the average person about 7 years to learn a new language fluently. This is not a quick process. This is something that's going to take time. So do not feel like a student has to have the simple present tense absolutely perfect down pat before you move on to something else. Just make sure that they're successful using it and that they're, 9 times out of 10, they're able to get their message across.
And I would just add to that, Lauren, that if you do have, activities that take longer than you thought and you don't get all 4 elements in, then you can aim at your next session to start out with whatever you didn't get to closer to the beginning so that they still keep cycling through having equitable experiences with all of the elements.
Oh, that
It
is a
doesn't
great piece of advice.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Melinda. Yeah, so if you get through, end up spending an entire lesson working on an activity that's focused on reading and writing, make sure to have a big focus on speaking, listening in that next activity or that next lesson or activity. That's great advice. So now let's think about lesson planning in relation to our imaginary students that we're working with, okay? If we wanted to put together a lesson plan for, I don't know, someone pick a student. Who do we want to start with?
Maria, she's already eager at her computer.
Oh, love that, Maria. So if we want to put together a lesson plan for Maria, where would we want to start? Well, let's pick an objective. What do we want to teach?
How about money skills since she's a business owner?
Ooh, I
Something
love
related
that.
to that.
Yeah, something to do with money, maybe even a little bit of marketing, right? So terminology like sales and prices. I love that. So what types of activities do we think we could do with her? Focused around, money, marketing. Well, let's find out about her business. Let's start with some of the basics, right? What is her business? What does she do? Maybe we find out that she has her own store online where she sells homemade jewelry that she makes. Let's pretend that's the case, just for the sake of our little lesson planning activity. She makes jewelry, and then she has an online store where she sells it from. She also has a little boutique, but most of her sales are online. Let's pretend that. So what kind of activities could we do with her to help her, increase her English market for her business?
I think it would, since she's an advanced English speaking person, ask her where her weakness is.
Oh, that's a good idea too.
And then give certain activities in the lesson plan to help her where she needs to be helped.
Yeah.
So if she's already an advanced English speaking person, what would she need? She might need writing, counting,
Absolutely. Yeah.
But
Maybe you want to use that as a warm-up activity with her, right? So at the start of the lesson, start asking her. So thinking about your business and what you want to accomplish with it. What do you want to work on? Right? Do you need help with advertising some of your jewelry and getting your stuff online? Do you need help thinking about pricing for some of your, the stuff that you're selling? Do you need help, with emails or drafting receipts whenever people make purchases? What does all of that look like for you? And figure out exactly, the specific areas that she wants to work on. That's
and
a
I
great
think that's
suggestion.
important because in the beginning, you talked about knowing your student. So that would be great, is to know what she needs, because this is not a cookie cutter plan. It's an individual plan to meet each person's individual need as well as their desire to increase their speaking and understanding of English to propel them, especially she's in business. She wants her business to expand. She wants it to be bigger and better than what it was. So, what does she need in this setting to help make that possible?
Oh, I love that. Those are great suggestions. Well, guess what? You could probably spend an entire lesson just on that, talking about Maria and how much business vocabulary she already knows. What is she already comfortable with? What are her goals for the business? What's her 1-year goal? What's her 3-year goal? What's her 5-year goal? And what are the steps that she needs to take to get there? And how does that relate to her English? You could literally spend an entire hour-long session with an advanced level student working on goal planning, especially a business owner, someone who's really trying to strategize something like that. Well, you guys, we've already put together our first lesson. Congratulations. Let's pick another student. Do we want to go with Thomas or Anna?
Hey, can I ask a question first?
Yeah, go right ahead, Nancy.
I wondered, so let's just say each person has 5 to 10 people in their class. So what we're doing is we're going to strategize for each person what would be appropriate homework for them. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's say you are working on, let's say Maria is one of the students that you have in your class, and you are working on something that has to do with money. Everyone has to know about money and finances, right? So maybe Maria's homework assignment, the journaling activities that she does, the reading activities that she wants to work on, focus a little bit more on business and her specific line of focus. You could have other students. Let's think about Anna. Let's pretend Anna has suddenly improved her English drastically overnight. I don't know what happened. She's now an advanced level student. Guess what? Anna does not have her own business, but she likes to cook. Guess what comes up a lot in cooking? Measurements and numbers. She might be more interested in doing something that has to do with family budgeting. Maybe if she were pretending to have an imaginary dinner party and she was trying to budget and come up with a menu for that. So within one class, you could be talking about numbers and finances and budgeting, but then whenever the students are working on the individual assignments, their individual homework, find ways to relate it back to them and to their individual interests. So that doesn't mean you need to design an entire lesson just for Maria that every other student has to sit through, but know Maria's goals, know what she wants to work on, and know how you can relate what you're teaching to the students' lives and to what it is they're wanting to learn. That's a great question, Nancy. Any other questions about Maria before we do a lesson plan for one of the other students? Okay, well, let's go ahead and pretend we're working with Anna then, since I've already pulled her into my little imaginary scenario. guess what? Another week goes by and all of her English progress has gone out the window. She is no longer an advanced student anymore. She's back to the beginner level. I don't know what happened. So now we're designing a new lesson for Anna. Where would we start with her? Let's start with a learning objective.
How about coming up with vocabulary for the kitchen, like sink, cupboard, dishes, things like that. And then work with maybe some verbs that have to do with cooking.
Absolutely. Yeah, especially if she's at a very beginner level and she's still at the point where she's building a lot of vocabulary, start with an area of interest for her. Something that she already does regularly. As she's cooking dinner the next night, hopefully she's going to be practicing English vocabulary in her head. Whenever she's reaching for a pot, when she's reaching for a pan, that's a chance that she can review some of those English words. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Working on, some of the kitchen vocabulary, working on some of the verb vocabulary. What are some ways that you could do that with her? What are some activities that you could do?
I think it would be if you're talking about her preparing a meal or cooking, is learning a recipe, because you have your ingredients and then you have the process. So she has to mix this amount, a cup of water to 2 cups of rice to half a cup of onions, stir it up, saute, mix it up, serve it. It could be a recipe lesson to go through to learn how to prepare the dish in English and go through the steps and what they are. So you have your verbs and you have your nouns, you have your adjectives. So that could be fun.
That could be a lot of fun. And there are some really simple recipes that you can find in English online. So you could find a recipe online in English. You could practice reading it. You could talk about the different ingredients that go into it. One of the coolest lessons that one of my advanced classes did during the COVID pandemic, it was after they had spent a bunch of time working on recipes, actually, and their big capstone activity. Each advanced student came up with a dish from their home country that they wanted to teach their classmates how to cook. So their final activity, it was a 2-part project. First part was they had to write down the recipe in English and share it with their classmates. And then the second part is they each recorded themselves cooking that recipe, explaining what they were doing. So they each had these little like mini cooking videos that they had put together. And then they all just shared the videos with each other. They practiced cooking each other's dishes. And then whenever the COVID pandemic finally ended, we had a big potluck celebration, whenever we all came back together. But that was probably one of the coolest ways that I had seen one of our classes adapt for virtual learning. I had a whole class that put together like a cooking show kind of series on YouTube, based off of some of this stuff. So we are getting close to the end of time now, so we're not going to have time to do a lesson plan for our friend Thomas, but it's okay. He'll be able to join a future session. So what next for you guys to look out for? We have our third session next week, March 15th, same time from 7 to 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. But we are really going to focus in on lesson planning. So this activity that I just did with you all, thinking through putting together a lesson for different students, I want you to do that for homework for this week. Okay? I want you to pick a level. It's up to you which level you would like to lesson plan for. You can either pick a beginner, an intermediate, or an advanced class. I want you to pretend like you are going to be putting together an hour-long lesson plan on Zoom for your class. We're going to pretend like you've only got 5 or 6 students. Okay, so it's a pretty small group. And let's pretend this is the first day of class, right? Either first or second day. So you kind of know the students, you're still getting to know them and everything exactly that they want to work on. Oh, and thank you, Dr. David, for a reminder about we are going to have a time change next week. So Nancy will send in an updated time, you know, in the Telegram. So we're all on the same page for that. Oh yeah, we'll have to adjust that for you all. We'll find a better time for next week then.
I'm looking at date and time and I will put that in the chat. Let me
Awesome. Thank you, Nancy. Yeah, Dr. David, thank you. I don't want you guys to have to be up at 5:30 in the morning next week. That's a lot. Okay, but that's going to be the plan for the next time we get together, is to do some lesson plan showcasing. We are going to spend most of the time in breakout rooms. So you are each going to have a partner that you're going to work with. And I'm going to try my best to match the, you know, English speaking folks with our friends over in Myanmar, so that hopefully you're working with someone who is, you know, on the other side of the world than you. But you're going to spend most of the time in a breakout session with a partner, just explaining your lesson, talking through it with your partner, brainstorming things that could work well, but also looking at the differences in your lesson compared to your partner's. It is amazing how many different approaches I have seen teachers, you know, come to the table with whenever they're putting together lesson plans. So pick a level, beginner, advanced, or intermediate, and then design an hour-long lesson plan for either the first or second night of class, whenever you're working with a group of maybe 5 to 6 students. That's what we're going to spend most of the time talking about, you know, next week when we get together. And then after that, we will come back together. We will share any awesome activities that you and your partner talked about, address any issues or concerns that you guys have, and then give you an opportunity to talk through next steps and where you guys want to be able to go from here.
Okay, that looks amazing. So I just want to throw this out here since we're here. We also change our time. It looks like we're at the same time as we are, like, since we're going ahead 1 hour next week, Yangon is changing their time, so they'll still be at 6:30. But our friend Rachel in Ghana, who's with us, it'll be midnight there. So if we want to, oh, I have it 8 o'clock. I'm sorry, I did that wrong. You're right. So if I back it up to 6, let me back it up to 6. Would that be okay with everybody? Is that all right?
If we do it at 6 p.m. Oh, you're muted, Nancy.
Let me look. So if we did 6 p.m., oh, it's still 4:30. No, we have to go later. So if we did 8, if we did 8 or 9, but then that puts Ghana, that puts Ghana in a bad place. So I'm gonna have to try to find a time. Let me just look at this real quick. Y'all
Sure.
keep talking, and I'm gonna look at this time zone meeting planner. And
Oh,
I'll
this was the end of my presentation, so this is the perfect time to jump into this.
okay. And if anybody has any
Na-
comments,
Nancy, I can be a partner for her in Ghana, and I can meet with her separately to review her lesson plan and share ideas.
okay, let me
If we can record it and watch a recording of synopsis of this after the fact, if that works. So
okay.
just offering that alternative.
Okay, so let me just, I'm gonna show you my screen here real quick. May I share my screen? Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen, and let me show you what I have here. And this is really great. This is a world clock meeting planner. And so if I'm looking at March 15, and I'm gonna go ahead and show the timetables. These Accra, Yangon, and Charlotte, because I figured that's the right. So what they're doing is they're telling you, let's see.
Oh, that's cool.
The green is where everybody is fine, you know. So let me see. Let me look at the evening. Let's look down here. And the evening for us, that puts Yangon and Accra 1 and 7. If we're at 11 p.m., see, that's,
No, Melinda, if you're able to meet with Rachel separately to help workshop her lesson plan, that would be great. I mean, honestly, that final session really is just workshopping the lesson plan and making sure you're comfortable with all of this other stuff and putting it together. So as long as she's able to sit down and do that with someone, you know, that's really the bulk of what that last session is.
so then we would have,
And
we would have
I
to
was
meet-
gonna,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. I was gonna say, so that she doesn't, so I say that I'm happy to whatever time do that for whatever time works best for her. And then we can make it open to anyone else who wants to join in to encourage as well. So she has that additional connection or feedback. And then she will have the opportunity to be able to watch the recording to see the other ideas shared here as well.
Thank
The
you.
summation especially.
Thank you for that. But then we still have the issue of Charlotte and Eastern Standard and Yangon. Because I know when Arizona comes in with Wendy, she'll be able to, she's an hour behind us. So it would have to be 8 or 9 o'clock our time to get these 2 times.
I wouldn't mind doing it at 8 o'clock from like 8 to 9:30.
Okay, how about you? Everybody up for 8 to 9:30 on next Friday? Good. Patsy? David?
Or, you know, the other option, if you are not able to join next Friday, still go ahead and put together your lesson plan for me. Go ahead and work on that. And then whenever that additional session gets scheduled with Rachel, you know, we could just kind of do a duplicate of, you know, lesson plan workshopping.
Okay. Sarah and Patsy, any thoughts on it?
I'll be out of in a different state next week, so I may not be able to do it. I could, well, and I'll be traveling Saturday, so
Okay.
I'm not sure if I'll be able to get into the mix or not.
Okay.
I may or may not have a computer to work on.
Okay, so if it were Saturday morning, that's a whole nother story. That would be their evening. But I guess, and Patsy, can you do it 8 o'clock at night next Friday? Okay. Okay, what about me and my friends?
Yeah, so we are okay, but I want to I don't want you to be late too. So what about like Curie and Ellen? So can we get up like 30 minutes earlier? So how do you think?
Like do 7:30, do 6 o'clock your time.
Yeah, we start at 6, so is it okay? Ellen and Curie?
Then if you did, so that would be 7:30 our time, would be 6 o'clock your time. Alan, Curry,
Oh,
Devon,
Curie said yes. Ellen?
Yes, okay for me too.
That would be a little
And
bit
Yvonne?
better. Yeah.
Yvonne? Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so yeah.
Okay, 7:30 then next week. Okay, that was just 6:30 your time. No, 6 o'clock your time.
No, 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, 6 morning news.
Okay, that's, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Lauren. This was really, really insightful. And I love all the things that you just gave us, all kinds of treasures. I just love it. So thank you so much.
I'm glad. My biggest goal at the end of all of this is I want you guys to feel confident, you know, going into this and being able to, well, you guys are going to be learning too, right? Again, success, not perfection, applies to all of us as teachers.
Amen. Thank you so much. Just bless you big for that. And thank you everybody for jumping in and just getting excited about this with us. We're so excited. So we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you so much, Lauren. Thank you, everyone.
Bye,
Have a-
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.